Hello and welcome to Jamie FX Art. I'm going to show you how I made my Edward Scissorhand prop replicas. These are a wearable item that I use with my costume. Now, this was the first version that I had of the Scissorhands, and these I bought online and then modified them. I wasn't really completely happy with them. I wanted a more movie accurate version, so I decided to try to make my own. The first thing I did was I sketched out some designs of each individual blade and how I wanted it to look. Each finger is different, so I wanted to get a general sketch of how I was going to do each one. Then I made a life cast of my hand. Now this is to give support for the blade and also something to shape them around to give you general size and length of your fingers. You can get the kits online and you're going to need two, one for each hand. The only thing I really stress is that when you're making the life cast, try to make your fingers as far apart as you can to give you room to sculpt the blades on. They don't have to be perfect because you're going to be covering the fingers in plastic wrap anyway. So for the thumbs, all I used was a material called Epoxy Sculpt. This is a air drying clay that once it's cured, you can sand it and paint it. I did put a layer of plastic wrap over the thumb. This is to prevent the epoxy sculpt from sticking to your plaster hand. Then I was able to sculpt the thumb piece right onto the plaster hand. It does take a few hours for the epoxy sculpt to cure, and once it is hardened, you can then sand it to your desired shape. I used a pretty heavy grit sanding block. You can get a finer one too if you want to go back over it and make it nice and smooth or get really fine details. After I'm done sanding, which makes a pretty big mess, I did use gloves and a mask because the dust does get everywhere. I then primed the piece with a white acrylic primer, just a water-based primer. And then I painted it with silver and black craft paints. It's a water-based acrylic paint and it dries fairly quickly. Here's the other thumb. I used the same process to make this one. And now for the blades. If you look at the top of the picture, you'll see there are some black blades cut out. These are just done out of paper. These were my templates to sketch the design onto Diabond. It's a hard material that is plastic in the middle and has a thin layer of aluminum on each side. So at the bottom of the picture, you'll see the shapes cut out in the Diabond, which I used a bandsaw. Then I used the epoxy sculpt to shape the blade around the finger and to actually hold the Diabond blade in place. Here is one of the blades just kind of resting on the finger as it is curing, and this helps hold the shape. Here are three of the blades once they have cured. Don't forget your other 3D portions, like you have the handles and little doodads sticking out everywhere, so don't forget to do those in the epoxy sculpt as well. And in the middle you'll see where the epoxy sculpt is kind of blended onto the blade, so I tried to make this as smooth as possible. Here's the same three pieces after they have been sanded. Again, you're going to want to use an acrylic primer over this. And here's when they are finished painted. Here's all the little doodads and little plates and things that are on, not on the fingers themselves, but on the hand or the glove. This is after all those little pieces are painted. I did sculpt the little discs and I made the little screws out of the epoxy sculpt. The wing nuts I did purchase just because it was easier just to buy those and then paint over them and glue them on. So here's all the pieces that are going to be attached to the hand. We've got the 8 blades and then the 2 thumb pieces and then all the little doodads that go on top of the glove. And this is the finished product. Now everything is attached to the gloves. I tried several different glues and I found that E6000 was the one that worked the best. And the gloves that I'm using, they're a very thin athletic gloves, so they have Velcro around the wrist, which I really wanted to have that to make sure they were nice and secure and they weren't going to fall off my hand. And I cut the very tips off of the fingers, just the very tip, because you want enough to really glue onto the inside of your blade. So that's just for comfort, and it's a very thin kind of lycra material because you want it to be comfortable. They're hot enough as it is wearing them, so you don't want like some thick woolly glove to have it on. And the other thing, you don't want it too thick as well because then your finger is not going to fit inside. Now remember when we put the plastic wrap on, that does add a little bit of bulkiness to your plaster hand. so you have a little bit of room to work with, but you do want them snug, but you don't want them too tight. And here's both hands, finished product with costume. Now all of these move independently, and it is pretty hard. I don't think you'd have to do some severe damage to these to really do some harm. I do want to suggest maybe putting a clear coat on top. I noticed when I move my fingers that up at the top of the hand, some of the paint has worn off from the friction. So you can have an optional clear coat over your acrylic paint if you want to preserve that. But I think it kind of gives a nice weathered look too. And there we have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I do want to give a special thanks out to Rob and Misty Cometti. Rob helped me with some of the design of this project, and he also donated some supplies and let me use his power tools. So very many thanks to him. I would have never been able to complete this project without his help. So yeah, send me your requests, and if you guys want to see anything else, let me know. And thanks for watching, and talk to you later.